Hello there, everybody. Welcome along to EFL Debate, and I'm delighted to be joined on the first League Two podcast of the regular season by Matt Boosey from Gills in the Blood TV and Ben Jones, our Tranmere Rovers supporter. But we've also got a special guest, which is Taylor, who's a Barrow supporter. How are you, Taylor?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, really well, thanks. Really appreciate your time. Just talk us through Barrow's exciting start to the season.
Yeah, can't complain. Obviously, two fairly tricky games to start the season. Tranmere away is always a tough place to go. A place where we've struggled in recent seasons to get a result, so that was pleasing to get over that and get 3 points on board to start season. Obviously, Sutton at home, Sutton a good side, especially when they put 5 past Notts County. Certainly gives them a boost, but managed that game very well in the end. Weren't particularly at our best, but got over the line and got 3 points. You know what they say: if you're not playing well, you're managing to get 3 points on board, then that's a great, that's what you want. And then a very good result against Accrington. Again, not at our best in the first 45, but kicked on in the second half, and persistence proved to do the difference. In the end, we ended up getting a good result. So still unbeaten, and some tough games coming up. So it's good to have a bit of a base to go off. So we're not panicking too much going into these next few games where it is going to be difficult to get over and get some points. But yeah, good start, can't complain.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben, what did you think of Barrow when you played them on the opening day?
Yeah, I mean, it was a tricky one. I mean, I think they were very well organised for sure. They're really tough to break down. I think we had a lot of possession without doing a huge amount with it in that game. A lot of chances outside the box without really getting in behind them in the same way we have in the 2 games since. So yeah, they look really solid, and I guess in this league that's always a really good starting point to work from. You look at all the sides you get promoted, and they all have that solid foundation one way or another. And yeah, I think Barrow definitely got that.
But you did have a bit of a, you gave me an interesting prediction the other day when you said Tranmere are still going to finish 10 points above Barrow. I hope I haven't thrown you under the bus there.
Yeah, maybe. I think that's more the confidence I've got in how I think we'll develop over the season.
Right, yeah.
I think pre-season I was saying to you, it's probably going to be a mid-table season. With us not really knowing what to expect from the manager, but we've kind of shown signs of improvement every game. Second half at MK Dons and then first half against Harrogate, completely different standard of football to anything we've seen for a few years. So, it's really promising signs from our point of view there.
Yeah, absolutely. Taylor, talk to us about the impact that Emil Aqua has had at Hog Street.
Yeah, brilliant start to the season from Aqua. I think Tuesday night really highlighted just how much of an impact he could really have for us this season. He came off the bench and was absolutely terrific. Accrington couldn't deal with him. Obviously, a very young defence at Accrington. He did bully them a little bit, I have to say. But he scored an excellent goal in that game to bring us level. And again, against Sutton, a brilliant finish again. I have great confidence that he could be a tremendous player for us this season.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds really exciting. I mean, you've obviously switched to a 3-5-2 this season, Taylor. Were you a little bit surprised about that, given how well 3-4-2-1 4-2-3-1? There we go. Get my numbers right. 4-2-3-1. That worked quite well at times last year.
Yeah, I think obviously we lost a few players over the summer and even towards the back end of last season. So I think we've sort of approached this season in a different way to what we have going into last summer. So I wasn't too surprised to see that obviously tweaks have been made to the system. We probably saw an indication of what was to come this season towards the back end of last season. We sort of set up in a more defense first approach, I would say, a lot more organized, a lot more structured, and I think we've seen that a lot more, particularly against Tranmere, particularly against Accrington. in the first half against Bolton in the Carabao Cup, where it was just sort of allow them to have a bit more of the ball and then sort of go forward with it.
Sure.
I think we're seeing that a little bit more, and I think that is sort of how we're going to set up. So I think it's not too much of a surprise because, as I say, we saw a bit of it towards the back end of last season. But I think we've got the players for it, and we're playing very, very well. Why not continue with it?
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, from an outside perspective, obviously Gillingham haven't played Barrow yet, but what have you made of their start to the season with 7 points from their first 3 games?
Yeah, very impressed. Again, we had this chat, didn't we, pre-season, and I've got them a lot lower than you have. We all have our reasons, but I just thought that at the time there were going to be teams that would improve past them, that could potentially buy their way past them. I've said that as well, and that's a big factor even in League Two now. Money. I get the whole Peter Wild thing. I think he's a brilliant coach, brilliant manager at this level. The only issue then for Taylor and the fan base of Barrow is that he likely gets snapped up unless they do get into the top 3 or the top 7 and get themselves promoted. But yeah, you can't argue with the start, unbeaten after 3, battling point away on the road on a Tuesday night is always a good sign. But like I've said about Gills, it is just a start, isn't it? That's the thing. Obviously, Gills fans, we're getting a little bit carried away purely because we've been so rubbish for the last 18 months to 2 years. So we're going to enjoy it, and why not? And I can't promise that I won't sing "We Are Top of the League" at least once on tonight's show. But all jokes aside, it's literally just a start. It's 3 games out of a 46-game campaign. We go and get beat at Crawley, or Barrow lose their game on the weekend, and suddenly they're back in the pack, and it's just a regular start. But no, very encouraging from their point of view. Pete Wild is brilliant at the level. It'd just be interesting to see once the heavyweights find their feet potentially and get going, and I'm sure they will because there's a lot that have had slow starts. I still think it'd be interesting to see where Barrow finish, and I still don't think they've got enough to sustain certainly a top 3 push. If they do, I'll happily eat humble pie, unless it's at Gilles' expense.
Absolutely. Taylor, the one area of concern I have with this Barrow squad at the moment is I wouldn't necessarily say Niall Canavan is a specialist outside centre-back. I reckon if you asked him, he'd probably prefer to play in the middle because he's quite an experienced defender. So is there a bit of a worry that with current personnel, there might be a bit of a chasm between maybe Newby and Canavan, or has that not been a problem for you so far?
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. I think there's still work to be done though. I think I don't think we've any loan signings whatsoever at the moment. So obviously we've got the loan market we can utilise to bring in a few faces if needs be. Was talks that James Chester could be being brought in as an additional player.
I'm not sure he's the profile you need, to be honest. I would actually go more for down the loan route, like a left-sided centre-back, someone that can slot in, and then you got Ray and Canavan competing to play in the middle. Whereas you're already quite well stocked, I would say, for middle centre-backs who are experienced.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from with that. Probably a ball playing centre back is what we could probably do with, sort of play out for the back a little bit more because obviously Ray and Canavan aren't necessarily the 2 you'd expect to be doing that. So right. I think a ball playing defender on loan could be an option. Obviously, we had Sam McClellan last season that was sort of in that mould. Unfortunately, unable to bring him back this summer. So there probably is room for bringing in a player on loan, but we'll see what comes of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of ball-playing defenders, Tyrrell Warren seems to have had looked quite composed in that draw at Accrington. I think he came into the 11 maybe for Thiele, I think, but he seems to have that bit of assurance about him. So could that be an option if Worrell and Newby have kind of locked down the wing-back spots?
Yeah, I do have to say Warren so far has come on leaps and bounds from last season. I think there was a few question marks as to where he was in terms of the ability for this level. Towards the back end of last season, cracks were starting to show a little bit, but personally I put that down as inexperience. He was still learning his first full season in the EFL, so obviously a lot to learn at a young age. But he seems to have really grown so far in what we've seen. He's obviously been brought into the centre-back role where, again, he looks composed. He looked good against Accrington. Didn't seem to be too challenged. So far, so good from him. Obviously, we'll have to see. We'll have to see over the course of the season. I think he started well last season, and then again sort of dropped a little bit in terms of his performances. So we'll see how he goes. But so far, so good from him. So hopefully more to come.
Yeah, and so far so good for the midfielders that you've brought in, Dean Campbell and Kean Spence. What an impact they made at Prenton Park on the opening day.
Yeah, Spence especially. What a strike that was. Absolutely fantastic. Campbell has been very composed. Jason Taylor was the man that wore the number 4 before him. I see some sort of similarities between him and Taylor.
Surely more mobile than Jason
He is
Taylor.
more mobile, but I see sort of similarities in sort of the play style. So it's nice to see that's continued. But Campbell so far, excellent player. I had high hopes from him. Obviously, he did very well at Stevenage last season. Came in with quite a few plaudits, sort of high expectations that he could do really well for us this season. So it's good to see that he's been able to live up to them so far. But Spence especially, I feel there's a lot to come from him. I think he could be one of the better players in the division. Looking back at the end of the season, he could be one of our best players. But we'll see how that goes again. But certainly made a name for himself with that strike on the opening day. That is some debut.
Yeah, cracking strike. Ben, I think you WhatsApped me about Dean Campbell after the opening day. Clearly, he was one who caught your eye.
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of missed that transfer when it happened in the summer because he was one I kind of thought we might have gone for. I don't know if we did or didn't, but Barrow have done really well to pick him up because I'd imagine a few clubs were probably looking at him after how he did first half of the season last year at Stevenage. And yeah, he was the one who really stood out for Barrow for me on that opening day. He's decent on the ball, but he's also pretty industrious and exactly what you kind of need in a Pete Wild side, really.
Yeah,
so I think he'll have a pretty good season for them. And the challenge for him is because to make sure he does it for the full season this year after kind of falling out of Stevenage's plans in the back half of last year. So it's kind of his personal progression. You'd kind of want to see him do it for a longer period.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully he can do that. Taylor, has the first 3 games made you more optimistic about what Barrow can do this season?
Yeah, I think we've seen that perhaps this Barrow team are a side that can actually, come back from a deficit. I think at times last season we'd go behind and our heads would drop, and we didn't necessarily have the personnel in order to find that motivation to kick on and find a result. But we've obviously been put under the cosh twice already this season, obviously against Sutton and Accrington, and we've really seen them kick on, and especially against Sutton, drag a result out of nowhere, because for 70 odd minutes it didn't look like we were going to score and equalise, and then out of nowhere a bit of class from Sam Foley picks out Aqua and we find another goal, and we ended up winning that game. So I think we're going to see a Barrow team that has a bit more bite to it, that is able to come back from behind and really drag out results where we struggled last season. Obviously, if you can gain an extra point or even 3 points, if even better, you're going to really do yourself some favours towards the end of the season when those points are really going to matter. And I think that's going to be the difference, where perhaps when we were challenging in the playoffs last season for some time, we didn't necessarily have the ability to come from behind, and that's where we lost our momentum and lost our points. I think that could be the difference in order to really ensure that we can push for those playoffs, if not even better, for the automatic places.
Yeah, for sure. And I think having a centre forward or two who the ball can stick to, I think is going to be huge as well. How many more additions are you looking at between now and the end of the window, Taylor?
Yeah, as I say, obviously we've not really utilised the loan market so far, so it'd be interesting to see if anything comes to that. I'd be surprised if not one or maybe even 2 get brought in. Obviously, I don't necessarily think that we want to be overly reliant on the loan market, but I think we need to try and use that market as and where we can. Obviously, Wild has his contacts, so let's try and use them. And
location helps as well.
Exactly, especially training in Manchester, it gives us a bit more of a central base. So we can try and use those Northwest clubs in and around the Championship, League One, if not Premier League even potentially, to bring in 1 or 2 faces. I'd be surprised if obviously we don't utilise it, but at the same time, we don't want to be overly reliant. So we'll see what comes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, very exciting stuff. Listen, Taylor, it's been such a pleasure to have you on, and all the best to the Bluebirds for the rest of the season.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, cheers, mate. Matt, I want to come to you about Gillingham's start, because it's been really impressive, isn't it? I think you've got 3 wins from your first 3 games, sitting pretty at the top of the table. You must be a pretty happy Gill right now.
Very, yeah. I said if I said start of the season, I felt if we went to Stockport and avoided defeat, I said there was potential to go unbeaten through August. I think Crawley would be a lot tougher than we'd envisaged before opening day. But yeah, if we can get through that without getting beat, I'd fancy us to see off Colchester, based on what I've seen from us and them at the moment. But yeah, in terms of, you can't ask for more. 4 games in all competitions, we've won all of them. We've not conceded a goal in the league. We look defensively so solid, it's ridiculous. There's a couple of players in there that you just think, like, how have we managed to get them? They're players that we wouldn't even have been linked to 18 months ago. Scott Malone is, people have said cheat code, that type of thing. He's phenomenal in terms of not just ability, but in terms of leadership and just the whole composure. You can see that he's played at such a good level, Premier League, Championship, and that type of thing. There was one moment at Stockport opening day, about 5 minutes to go. I think it was just before we'd scored, and the ball got flung into our box, and he's running towards his own far post. So if that's, no disrespect, if that's David Tatonda or Ryan Law, starter last season, they probably hack it into the Cheadle end, or they try and have a touch and put us under pressure. Scott Malone, as cool as you like, without even batting an eyelid, just chested it back to Jake Turner from about 2 yards. And the bloke who was sat next to me, no word of a lie, he went, I don't want him doing that. I can't cope. That doesn't belong in League Two. It was just unbelievable just to have the wherewithal and such awareness to just cushion it off his chest back to the keeper rather than putting us under pressure and defend a corner. Shad Ogie, Leighton Orient centre-half, must have been absolutely phenomenal last season if he couldn't get a game, because he's been an absolute revelation, and he can play as well. And he's that left-sided centre-back that every club wants. I think they're very rare. They're a rare commodity, and to get one that can do both sides of the game is really good. Keeping Connor Masterson out the side. So I know he's had an injury, which is why he missed the Stockport game, but Connor Masterson doesn't get back in on merit at the moment. And Connor Masterson, for me, is top 5 centre-backs in the division. Obviously, in terms of goals, if you don't concede, you only need one. So I've got no issue with it at the moment. We've had to play a slightly different way because we've had no Ollie Hawkins since middle of pre-season. But again, Ashley Naderson has been an absolutely brilliant find. Him and Tom Nichols, you can see they've played together for a while. That's both of the last 2 games. It's Naderson scored and Nichols has set them up. So there's clearly an understanding there, and we look forward to Saturday where they go and take on their old employers. It'd be an interesting matchup, that for sure. But yeah, couldn't have asked for more. If someone had said was going to have 9 points and knock Southampton out the cup, I'd have probably laughed a little bit. I'd have been happy with probably 2 draws away from home and beating Accrington. That would have represented a solid start. So to be where we are is really, really good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I suppose you can't necessarily rely on keeping a clean sheet every week, because even if you're brilliantly organised, there's always that chance that the opposition hits a belter from range, or the ball ricochets into the box and someone else puts it away, because there's so many variables in football. So I suppose what I'm getting at is, are there layers that Gillingham could add to the defensive foundations they've established in the first couple of weeks that are going to allow you to pose more of an attacking threat, perhaps?
I think so. One would come in the form of Ollie Hawkins getting fit, because then we can play with an orthodox target man, which Neil Harris has done very well for years. So there's that. We get Macaulay Bond fit, and we then suddenly have a fox in the box type striker whose record says that he's probably, I don't want to say too good for the level, but he certainly, his best numbers have come at National League.
Yeah, he's a League One striker,
and then
I would say.
I'd say he's a League One striker. I think it's when he got announced, I think he's got to double figures in 4 of the last 6 seasons, and they're the seasons when he's played regularly. So
I'm sure he got close to that in the Championship as well.
I think he did. I think it was a mixture of 2 clubs, and he got to 11, I think. So yeah, so there's clearly a goal scorer there. He does need to get up to speed. But Naderson's been a real find, because he's got that one asset that we didn't have last season, which I've said to you a million times, which made us one-dimensional, and that's pace. He can stretch defenders, he can get in behind, and he can do elements of the Ollie Hawkins role as well. He can play back to goal and win his flick-ons and that type of thing. But the biggest asset is obviously the fact that he's played with Tom Nichols. In terms of additions, I think we probably need another wide man, someone a bit different, maybe that can play from either side, that can create something. We've got Dom Jeffries, who's done that job very well, and I think since we last spoke, he's growing into that role more and more.
I would have envisaged him as more of a kind of mid 2010s Milner sort of player, like a converted midfielder, tucking in off the wide position and just getting up and down. That was kind of how I imagined it.
I think, that's probably a fair assessment if you're looking from the outside in, but we see him every week, and I think we don't give him enough credit. He is quicker than we think, so he's got the energy and the engine to certainly get up and down from wide areas. I think he set up. Did he set up a couple of goals in pre-season from wide? We've got Jaden Clark, who's come in, who can play as a 10 on the side. Was absolutely phenomenal against Southampton. But you've got to bear with him. It's man of the match and comfortably as well. But that's not going to happen every week. This is the player that was playing Dulwich Hamlet 6 months ago, so you can't expect that from him every time.
Do you know what, though, Matt? I kind of like that you've got a bit of that in this team, because sometimes I've seen it with clubs who have had big budgets in the last sort of 5-6 years in League Two, where Salford, I think, at times have been guilty of this, maybe Mansfield to an extent as well, where you go for those experienced players that are 30 years old and have won promotion from this league twice in the last 4 years. Or have played higher, and you always go for the obvious option, and sometimes it's the less obvious ones. You need the bit of the wild card that kind of shoots out of the pack and stirs everything up. Sometimes you need a bit of that in the equation as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I think Jaden's first start was Salford, first day of last season. He was decent enough, played slightly more centrally, but he was absolutely brilliant against Southampton. And I know Southampton made 11 changes from the team that had beaten Sheffield Wednesday on the Friday and had made.
Even that's a good 11, though, isn't it?
Well, you've got Alex McCarthy in goal, who was in the England squad 4 years ago. You've got Perot, the centre half. You've got Shay Adams up front. They've got Stuart Armstrong starting. They're bringing on Joe Aribo, who's gone for millions of pounds to the Scottish Premier League in the last few years. It was still a good side, and the youngsters are decent. The biggest threat came from the right hand side. I think it might have been a lad called Mara, is it? Or he was one of two that stood out. But Jaden Clark was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, and did not stick out at all in a way where you think he's not played at the level. But you've got to bear with him, and that would be where the B team comes in and has a real positive effect, because he can play regular games without being in the spotlight. And if he does have a rough trot of form, then you can take him away from the first team environment and let him go and enjoy his football. And
do you know what? It's the B team, Matt, that makes that I'm as excited about for Gillingham as much as anything else. Like having that group of players, that group where players can develop and sort of grow into sort of the first team environment. I think that's really exciting.
It is, yeah, and it's something that we needed to do, and we're finally dragging ourselves into the 21st century with it, and the recruitment team that we've got behind Neil has been brilliant. And you talk about clubs that need them types of players, because it's very easy to go down the obvious route and buy, someone who's won League One, who's 30. But we've got our Sean Williams, and we've got our Timmy Diengs, and we've got our Glenn Morrises, and our Maximas to an extent in terms of experience. But then we've added like our Jaden Clarks. Ethan Coleman came in arrived the same night as Jaden Clark, and everyone was like, been on loan at Bromley. What's that? He's phenomenal. Been so good. Jaden Clark himself, Shadrach Ogie. Played 10 games in the league, or 12 games for Leyton Orient last season, but he's one hell of a player. And then you add in Dom Jeffries, and then you've got the experience of Johnny Williams, Macaulay Bonne. It's a very good mix, and I'm trying not to get ahead of myself, because it is only a start, and I understand that entirely. But I read a tweet, I think, yesterday that said the last time we won our first 3 games in the league was 2012-13 under Martin Allen, and we won League Two.
Won the league, yeah. So, Stuart Nelson, you had in goal that year.
Stuart Nelson, we had who was Adam Barrett?
Cody McDonald.
Cody McDonald came in. I think he came in on loan end of the season. He wasn't with us then. He was. He came in on loan. He'd had a loan in 2010, and then had gone to Norwich, Coventry, I think, and then came back in. He came in the back end of that season. I think he scored 4 or 5 in about 8 games. We had Dion Burton and Danny Kedwell up front that season. Burt's was unbelievable.
Kedwell was Wimbledon as well, wasn't he? I think he might have had a spell.
Yeah, it was. And ironically, the game that we won the title, I think we drew 2-2 with Wimbledon. The point was enough for us to win the title, and it was enough to keep Wimbledon up as well. So Danny Kedwell had sort of like the perfect storm of an afternoon.
That's been fun. It'd
but
have
yeah.
to go between the two parties, wouldn't he?
Yeah, because there's a legend at both. Yeah.
I love it. Ben, coming to you on this then, how excited or how impressed have you been by Gillingham from the first 3 league games, and of course that League Cup victory over Southampton, which was no mean feat as well?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I've not seen anything of them, so I can't put too much comment. The only thing I could say is, I think their recruitment's been a bit smarter than maybe Stockport and a couple others who have kind of just gone after a couple more key signings and not really put any depth behind the squad. So when they found at the start of the season that their strikers aren't really firing,
Do you think Gillingham needed more though than maybe
I think everyone does, and especially when you consider we're playing these 110-minute games this season, where they're trying to make sure they get the 60 minutes of in play or whatever it is. I think the squad depth is going to be really important, and they seem to have certainly a good kind of group of 18 players who could all interchange without weakening the side too much. Whereas, I don't know, as I say, Stockport, I think they've maybe only got 14 or 15 in that mould. So once you start getting injuries and or you need to rotate to keep energy levels high, I think that'll be where some clubs do better than others. And I put Gillingham in that category. So it just kind of be interesting because it's a marathon, not a sprint, isn't it? But a good start always helps. It gets you that positive momentum. But the real period is kind of when you get up to sort of December and January, and it's a bit of a slog to grind the results out, and that'll be when things like squad depth and all those kind of things come into play. So that'll be interesting to see. And I haven't actually looked at the fixtures to see when we're playing Gillingham because looking at the stats, I think it'd be a bit of a clash of styles this year.
I would imagine so, because you've gone with a lot more of a progressive sort of ball playing style, haven't you?
Yeah, well, I think we can mix it up a bit the way we play now, because I think we've got the second most passes in the division and the most successful long passes. So we've got a really diverse style going on there.
You played Gillingham on the 25th of November, by the way.
Yeah, that's the first game. Yeah, Prenton Park. I've just found it is the 25th of November.
Yeah, because I think the thing I've seen on their stats so far is they're not conceding chances, but they're also not creating too many. Whereas kind of in our games, certainly we've had a lot of chances. I think we've had best part of 70 chances in our 4 games so far this season, which is night and day compared to Mickey Mellon's teams. But it's also kind of the way we've done them as well. We can pass through the lines, or we can put the ball in behind, and for someone to run out like a Sam Taylor who's scored.
Talk to us about Sam Taylor, Ben, because he's had a really big start to the season. He was someone I think you might have earmarked to me before the campaign as well.
Yeah, well, the first time I actually saw him was against Northampton, last game of the season last year. And there was a couple moments, nothing more in that game, where you thought, he might have something. You just track the ball out of the air, probably a bit better than you would expect from a League 2 player. Never mind like an 18-year-old making their first appearance. And then in pre-season, he kind of stood out a bit, and indoors kind of made a comment saying, well, he's not there to make up the numbers. He's there to compete with Josh Hawkes and Kieran Morris for a starting place. Keeping in mind that Kieran Morris is probably our best player and Josh Hawkes got player of the season last year. So
does Taylor get into Tranmere's best 11 right here, right now, do you think, Ben?
Well, he kept Hawkes out the team against Harrogate and we won 3-0. So he's got 2 goals in 4 games, both very different goals as well. One from outside the box, one and one with the keeper put through his legs. So he seems to have a bit of everything as well. A little bit of running power, definitely a bit of trickery, a great first touch. So it's going to be really interesting how he develops. And I think for most Tranmere fans, they weren't kind of expecting him to be, at that level.
Yeah.
So we were expecting, or a lot of people were expecting, we needed another winger type player in. But I think, where we are now, we're probably better off just, giving Sam the game time, and then we've got our own player developing. I think he's 18 still, and he looks like he could play a lot higher than this level.
But Ben, the slight, I appreciate that, it's systematically, it's actually come together quite nicely from a tactical point of view early days. And you obviously got that first win against Harrogate. But I also look at the system, and it does feel a little bit like you're trying to have your cake and eat it a little bit, because you've got Regan Hendry at the base of midfield. You've got two wingers in Kieran Morris and Sam Taylor playing wider in the diamond. You've got Connor Jennings, who's essentially a forward behind two out-and-out strikers in, Luke Norris and Christian Dennis. I would just wonder that if Morris and Taylor are caught wide and Jennings is caught high at the pitch behind the front two, does that not risk leaving a massive chasm in the centre of the park that's asking Regan Hendry to cover so much ground that might be a bit of an ask at times?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting what will happen when we come up against, I don't really know which sides, maybe like a Wrexham who will turn the ball around very quickly from back to front. They're not going to try and play through us; they'll play over us, basically. So it'd be interesting what we do in that scenario, because the advantage of basically the way we're playing, which is almost a 4-2-4, is that it lets us press very high up the pitch. So when we were playing
4-2-4 with sort of Morris,
it was actually Connor Jennings who was sitting deeper than Morris.
Really, Connor Jennings in the centre of midfield.
Yeah, and he it would surprise you how well he played both second half at MK Dons and also. Against Harrogate midweek, it was actually Christian Dennis was dropping off into the gap behind Norris, and that's where he picked up his assist for Sam Taylor.
I find that very, very interesting that you've got Connor Jennings playing central midfield.
You have to say it, but it's a very interchangeable system at the minute. I wouldn't actually say that, apart from Norris, who's quite obviously the focal point. Sure. I wouldn't say any of the others have like a pigeonhole position. They all interchange. You quite often see Sam Taylor started the game as the right inside forward, and then at times he would swap with Kieran Morris or Connor Jennings, and then towards the end of the game we actually had Josh Hawkes almost in Regan Hendry's position. So it seems to be very kind of flexible, which is quite intriguing. It's turning out a lot of chances for us.
Sure. But just let's take Christian Dennis, for example, Ben. He's someone who does his best peeling off to the back post and poaching goals. You think of Connor Jennings, he's someone I would probably want making a dart maybe to the near post to get on the end of things, or maybe as a pressing second striker. It does feel a little bit like square pegs in round holes, and I appreciate from how it's come together, it's probably doesn't look like that at the moment. But I don't know, from an outsider, I find it difficult to kind of get my head around some of those ideas.
Yeah, I think it's definitely different, which is kind of why it's how good it's kind of turned out in the last two games. It surprised people under Barnsley. So I know it's really hard to describe. You'd have to kind of see it a bit to appreciate the fluidity of it. But what kind of impressed me most midweek was, so first half we dominated the game and we got that early 2-0 lead. And second half, Harrogate had the two really fast wingers in
Following and O'Donnell.
Yeah, I mean, they must be two of the fastest wingers in the league.
Yeah, Following started really well, to be fair. He
looks a real handful. But so second half, we had that risk on the counter, so we decided just to kind of sit off and, somewhat concede territory a bit so that those two couldn't actually get at us. And when we did that, Harrogate didn't really have an answer to it, and we ended up breaking on the counter and finishing the game 3-0. So it's quite adjustable the way we're playing. So that kind of gives me a bit of hope that when we do come up against some of these other styles like your Wrexhams and we have the next three games, we've got Salford who are going to come and try and keep the ball. Then we go to Notts County again, who I assume will try and keep the ball.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting one.
Yeah, and then the week after that, we actually play Wrexham at home. So the next three games is going to be really interesting. It's pretty much the hardest run of three games you could get in this division, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Be fascinating to see how that goes. Delighted to be joined by Dapper, the Doncaster Rovers supporter. Real pleasure to have you on, Dan. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. It's a pleasure to be on. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, great to have you. Just talk to us about Doncaster Rovers' slightly shaky start to the League Two season.
Yeah, you can put it that way. I think starting with a 1-0 defeat at home to Harrogate, I think it was tough because there's been so much positivity and optimism coming into this season after two to three seasons of absolute dire football under numerous managers. I think the lack of financial backing has impacted the squad a lot over the last couple of years, and what we've seen is a really lackluster club and one that's just started to deteriorate and drop further and further down the leagues. And then this summer, Grant McCann comes in. The recruitment's been really good. There's been investment, and John Ryan, the ex-chairman's been involved, buying tickets for the people who are struggling in the current climate, and everything just seemed to be going together. So you think home, Harrogate, tipped to go down. It's the story's written, isn't it? It's 3 points and we're on his way.
Certainly was.
And, they'd clearly not read the script because they played really well. They sat in well. They defended like a unit. You could see that they've worked together for a number of seasons, and they look well organised. And I think there was nerves from the Donny boys, and we just couldn't break them down. Didn't do enough on the day. I think the penalty was questionable. A couple of refereeing decisions were questionable, but he's seen it as he's seen it as give it, and we didn't do enough to get anything out of that game. And then we move on to Hull in the Cup, a really good performance, a good result, and rewarded with a decent cup tie at the end of August. And you think, right, we're clicking onto Newport, another team who's tipped to be fighting down towards the bottom end of the table, and we get battered 4-0, just don't turn up at all. And it's like same old story for Doncaster, and you start to think, is it going to be another one of those seasons where at the start of the season you think everything's going to go our way, and then nothing does. But move on to Tuesday, Mansfield, an improved performance. I mean, you look at Mansfield, Notts County and MK Dons as our next three. I was hoping for 6 to 8 points in August. We've currently got 1. So we've got to get some results out of Notts County on Saturday and MK Dons next week. But an improved performance. I think it's just going to take time to kind of mould this team into what it can be. I think we've seen flashes of it, but I think our problem at the minute is we've recruited from non-league decent players, but I think it just might be a case of giving them time to adapt to a higher level of football. And under Grant McCann, I think he's got the ability to get us playing and get us winning more points than that.
Yeah, absolutely. Patience, I'm sure, is the order of the day at Doncaster. But Matt, if we compare Doncaster's start to the season with Gillingham, because I think they're two similarly fancied teams going into the campaign, I would say that the difference between those two sides is that Gillingham have got the momentum or the synergy of a group that had been together for the second half of last season and have been able to kind of carry that on. Whereas Doncaster, although they made some really exciting signings on paper like Richard Wood and Joe Ironside, it is a bit of a new look team. And I guess that's kind of shown in the differences of results, where Doncaster have only got 1 point from the first 3 games and yourselves have got 9.
Yeah. The two that you've pointed out were the two standout signings for me as well. I remember doing my season preview video, and I actually had Doncaster only 1 place below us. I've got us both in the playoffs at the start of the season. I thought Grant McCann coming back was a huge factor. But it can take time, can't it? It can take time to gel. If you look at our opening day side at Stockport, you've got Nichols, Lapsley, Jeffries, Williams, Coleman, Ema, Alexander and Turner. That's 8 of the 11 that were there last season and were certainly there from January. And when we were, at the time, we were the second best team in the division up until the end of the season. I know it's now, we're top of that league, aren't we, because of Stockport's poor start. But I'm sure that McCann will get Donny going sooner rather than later. It'll just be a case, I think, if the next two are results that don't go their way, the fan base have just got to stay with it because they're good sides, MK Dons and Notts County, and I know Notts County have probably not started as they quite wished as well. They're finding out, and same as Wrexham, that this division is a lot tougher than just turning up and you just win football matches. There's more to it than that, regardless of how much money you've got and how much celebrity your owners have got. I think Doncaster will be certainly, they're not going to be in a season where they're going to have to be looking over their shoulder. Obviously, you want to get that first win as quick as possible because it just builds that confidence and it gives you what you said about us, momentum. But I don't think it's a case of panic stations if they don't win any of the next two. Whether that happens, we know what social media is like. It happens to all of us at all of our clubs, but they've certainly got the makings of a good side. And yeah, you have to give it a little bit. Just out of curiosity, Dan, how many started your opening day defeat that were there last season, or was it?
Oh, got me there.
I tell you what, I might be able to get this up, but has it been pretty much a new look side, Dan?
Yeah, I think there was six or seven debutants on the opening day against Harrogate. So unlike Matt, where you had 8 players that were there from last season, we pretty much had the same, which were new signings. So it will take time, and like I say, I think McCann's got the ability to get tune out of a decent crop of players. My one worry is we've got 6 or 7 out injured already, but none of these are from injuries that they've sustained this season. They've been from kind of being advised to go and get operations on previous injuries, and then they've ended up breaking down from those operations. So I read in the local paper that the club's currently launching an investigation about the advice and kind of the protocol behind players getting operations mid-season, I think.
Yeah, it was seven players who started on the opening day that were debutants, and 9 in terms of appearances. Ben, Tranmere have won promotions in the past without necessarily firing on all cylinders early doors. So, would you say, from a Rovers perspective, far too early to panic for Doncaster Rovers?
Yeah, I mean, the season we came up out of the National League, we were 18th after maybe 16 games or so.
Didn't score a goal by October.
No, we didn't get going at all that season. And even in this league, every year we see a team that comes right the way through the pack. I mean, last year Stockport nearly did it. They were mid-table at Christmas, and then, what did they finish? 4th. So, they nearly made that top 3, as kind of Bolton and Bristol Rovers had done the 2 previous years. So I don't think any of the sides that have had, slower starts than they'd like will be too worried just yet. You mentioned Notts County as well, and kind of Wrexham having that heavy defeat on the opening day. I'm sure that kind of all these sides who have made a number of signings, once they bed in, and once that kind of early season nervousness is out the way as well, I think I always find that like the start of the season is a little bit like the end of the season, and that you can not really predict too well what the result's going to go. It's kind of as you get into the season where things smooth out and the better sides rise up the table, and the early front runners kind of fall off the pace a bit. I'm not saying that'll be the case with Gillingham, but some of these other sides like Harrogate and so on, who might put the odd good performance in at the start of the season, once they've lost that early wind out of their sails, they'll kind of fade away, and that'd have to be the hope for both ourselves and for Doncaster, that we kind of, as we settle in with all the new signings and those kind of things, that you find your way of playing and, you pull yourself through the pack.
Yeah, absolutely. Daniel, who have been the new signings that have sort of been able to catch the eye, even in a side that hasn't fired on all cylinders just yet?
Yeah, I think Tyler Roberts, left winger on loan from Wolves. He looks a tidy player. He's got power, pace. He's good with the feet, the ball at his feet, and also Satona on the right hand side. I think the thing for me with Deji, he could do with releasing the ball a little bit quicker. He's kind of a little bit too raw. He tries to beat a man twice, and for me,
he is super quick, isn't he? He beat Dan James and Marcus Rashford in a sprint test at Man United. So
yeah, I can't remember seeing a player so quick at Donny. He's got bags of pace. But yeah, I'd like to see him kind of beat the man and get the ball whipped in. But you've already mentioned him. I think Ironside started pretty well. He just needs a bit more support. You can see that he can hold the ball up, and if we play to his strengths and get Satona and Roberts closer to him, I think we've got a good chance of unlocking defences in League Two.
Has that been the issue so far? Just Satona and Roberts being able to catch the eye individually, but maybe not getting them quite close enough to Ironside, I guess?
Yeah, I think we're missing a creative midfielder. I said it before a ball was kicked, that a creative midfielder was what we were lacking, and maybe like a strong midfielder as well. I do think we're a bit too lightweight. And I think if you've got that creative midfielder who Ironside could lay it off to, and then probably bring Satona and Roberts in a little bit more, we'd get a bit more joy going forward.
Creative?
Yeah, it'd have been nice. Did you say, could that have been Clayton? Did you say?
No, could Broadbent be creative?
Oh yeah, sorry. I thought you mentioned Clayton. I was like,
No, I'm not saying Adam Clayton's great.
But yeah, Broadbent's kind of growing into the team. But like I said earlier, we've kind of recruited players that have not got bags of experience at this level, and I think it'll just take time for them to kind of adapt to the physicality of the league and kind of the. I think there is a pace to the division this season. I think we've seen League Two where it's been quite sluggish, quite slow, and quite brutal in the past. I think the quality level has increased massively this season. So yeah, I think it'll take time for us to adapt, but possibly Broadbent could fill that role.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what you think about this, Ben, in terms of the importance of physicality in League Two, because I feel like we often say that we need physicality in there, but then you can see a 5'6" midfielder that's sort of snapping into challenges and making his presence felt, and sometimes the height or physicality can sort of cease to matter sometimes. So how much importance would you put on that?
It's tough. A lot's down to like the play style, isn't it? I mean, having not seen Doncaster yet, I kind of imagine that they're going to try and build towards a possession-based style, because I think that's kind of what McCann has done previously. So you do need some technically strong players then, but at the same time in League Two, with those sides, you find that then some of your sides like Harrogate can just bully them out of games. There's going to be that high energy kind of bustling approach. So you need to find that balance, really. I don't think you can just say kind of you need to be physical or you need to be strong technically. You need a bit of both in League Two, and you also need to have the ability to kind of change teams within games as well. So if you do get a lead, you need someone off the bench who can come and fulfill a different role to either retain possession or you just give that physical presence when certain teams start to kick the ball long at every chance, and maybe you need to go to 3 centre backs and all those kind of things. And I think any of the sides this year who have got that flexibility with their squads will do really well. It's because I agree there that I think this League Two is going to end up being even more competitive than last year. We could see a really close group. There may not even be a clear runaway team. Could be really tight from first right the way down to mid-table. So it'll certainly be interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Daniel, who have been the opposition teams that have impressed you most so far?
Mansfield Tuesday night. I think they spread the ball around really well. They make the pitch really wide. I think Akins on the wing caused us heaps of problems all night, and it was one of those games where I came out and gladly took the point, even though we went ahead twice in the game and we were pegged back. I think the scoreline probably wasn't a true reflection on the amount of the ball that Mansfield had, the amount of pressure that they put us under. But then the positives that I take that out of that as a Donny fan is that we got spanked 4-0 on Saturday, and the team that we had last season and the way that we played last season, I think it'd have been the same again on Tuesday night. So I think to get out of that with a draw and show that grit, determination and desire to get something out of the game, then I see that as a positive point. We're off the mark. We've got a couple of goals. But yeah, Mansfield, I think any team finishing above Mansfield this season will be in the playoffs, if not automatic.
It's always a tough place to go as well. So you take a draw there any time of the season, really, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think Mansfield are going to challenge, Ben?
Yeah, I think I had them 5th or 6th on my preseason prediction. So yeah, they'll be up there, and certainly like all the early stats are pointing towards them. Yeah, looking really good. I think they've got by far and away the highest cumulative XG in the division.
Oh right, okay.
By quite a long way as well. So they certainly look very good statistically going forward. It'd be interesting to see what they actually play like. But yeah, they'll be up there. Yeah, they're always up there, aren't they?
Yeah. What about you, Matt? Who's caught your eye?
Just who we've played, or in terms of anyone?
Either or.
It's tricky to say without sounding too big-headed. No one scored a goal against us in the league, so it's been tough. Stockport weren't as good as I thought. I thought Stockport made it easy for us by playing Nick Powell as a centre forward first 25 minutes.
Yeah, they're without Carl Wootton at the moment, so they don't really have.
They are, but they're still playing the same way. And I spoke to a couple of county fans on my preview show and they're on the Scarf Bagara War podcast, and they said that. But the trouble is that what they're doing is they're not changing the way they're playing, so they're trying to pigeonhole people into a role. They became more of a threat Stockport when they dropped Powell in and played him as an orthodox 10, and then they got Ola Offey and Barry closer together as two proper centre forwards. Accrington are very much a John Coleman side. We've seen it for 22 years, and he's done it really well. But that should have been 3 or 4-0.
Yeah, he wasn't happy with their performance at your place, so presumably that was quite comfortable.
It was, yeah. It was one of the most comfortable 1-0s I recall us having in a long time. I know Coley come out and said afterwards that they're good if they get turned round, and they didn't deal with that. But yeah, second half we should have scored at least a couple more. Sutton had their moments, but again they're very similar to Accrington. They get it into the mixer quickly, and they rely on playing off second balls off of big men, whether that's Harry Smith when he's not getting himself sent off, or I think it was Lee Angle was the focal point on Tuesday. Lee Angle, you know what you get. He does what he says on the tin, but he's never going to. I think it's been a long time since we've seen Lee Angle at his best. And Scott Cashkett, we know what we had Scott Cashkett last season. Works incredibly hard. He'll run the channels. He'll be a pest. Is his end product always there? No. But he was slightly unlucky with one. It looked like he was onside, so we got away with one there. In terms of the whole division, I'm just trying to get the league table up. It's I'd say Crawley. I think just on the fact that everyone has got them to really struggle. That's it. It's not just one or two of them. It's literally everybody is saying they're getting relegated. I think Scott Lindsay does a brilliant job. Had a Crawley fan on the match preview show who said that he's been really good at just being able to block out all the surrounding noise of the background stuff, the WAGMI issues. He's been allowed to go and get his players in, and he's done it very well. And I think it'll be a very interesting match-up Saturday, because I'd imagine it'll be two very contrasting styles in. Yeah, I mean, you look at their start as well. It's not just like, no disrespect, they've not played three teams that you'd think are going to be down the bottom. They played Bradford, Salford, and MK Dons, three teams that I'd say 80% of football fans would say are going to be challenging around the playoffs at worst. So it's a really, really impressive start to the season. But again, that's all it is, isn't it? It's a start. It's 3 games. It's a long way to go yet. But yeah, if I had to pick one, Crawley Town, absolutely.
On that theme of teams that have maybe defied their doubts a little bit so far, Daniel, what did you make of Newport County when you saw them? Because apparently their press was really impressive.
Yeah, I've only seen the highlights for that game, but it looked like we just didn't turn up. And from social media posts, I think there were so many not Newport County fans saying that it's the best I've seen them play in years. So I think it was a combination of us being especially poor on the day, but then being exceptional. But yeah, from what I saw, they just didn't give us a minute on the ball, and came out deservedly 4-0 winners by the looks. Because from all accounts, it could have been 6 or 7. So yeah, it's a strange one though, because the lost previous game, the loss of the game after. So I don't know if it. I'm hoping it's a blip for us and a flash in the pan for them, but only time will tell with that one. But I think if they get that level of performance consistently through the season, then I think I'll be wrong, because I think I had them kind of low, maybe 18th, 17th, I think, in my predictions.
I have them going down, actually, so it'd be very interesting to see how they do. For Doncaster Rovers to find the form you need to get into the top 7, which, okay, it's still early days, but you don't want to be so far cut adrift from the top 7 that you're kind of playing catch up. Like, I think it's important that you do start to pick up some points, because at the moment you're 4 points off the top 7. You don't want that sort of gap to extend to 7 points, because all of a sudden you're going to be playing catch up. So what have Doncaster got to do right now, Daniel, to make sure that you start getting some results?
For me, it's getting the basics right. We seem to say it so often, especially over the last couple of years, that we've just not got we've just not got the basics right. And I think sometimes we probably try to overplay. And for me, simple passing, simple movement, staying in shape, and just decision making. I think there's been so many times where I've questioned the decisions of the pass that they've decided to make, and they've not quite put enough on it, which has then put us under pressure. I think Mansfield's first goal came from that. Anderson had just come off the pitch. I think he'd broken his nose. Richard Wood had just come on. So I think Mansfield hit us when we were just a little bit unorganised, and it was just a wayward back pass, and we were kind of on the attack, and then straight away you're having to turn around and get back, and there was just an overload at the back post. So I think it's just maybe silly individual errors, but I think that will come with players gaining that experience at a higher level, especially the guys that we've got from the National League this summer. So yeah, just kind of simple stuff, and yeah, just improved decision making, and I think we'll get that consistency.
Yeah, well, hopefully that's the case. Listen, Daniel, it's been such a pleasure having you on. Talk to us about what you're going to do with your channel this season and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, I'm busy outside of the channel. There's work and weddings and everything happening at the minute, so it's a busy time. So for the channel, it's just match previews, match day vlogs for every game that I go to, and then we do a 72 review on a Sunday where we try to go across as many clubs as we can. And all three of you guys are more than welcome to come on and talk about your clubs whenever you're free on a Sunday night.
Lovely stuff. Well, I'd love to join you. Thanks for joining us. Thanks as always to my regular guest Matt from Gills and the Blood TV and our Tranmere Rovers supporter.
Top the league. There you go. I did it once.
There we go. Brilliant stuff. Thanks very much, folks. This has been EFL Debate. Thanks to you for watching at home, and Gillingham are top of the league.